Cabin Broadcast.
This is the Lotus Bloom Podcast. And here is your host, Morgan Wiley.
Welcome back to another episode of the Lotus Bloom Podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Wiley. I hope wherever you are that you are staying safe and healthy and sane, or at least doing the very best that you can. I think during this time of COVID-19, and really any time of challenge or trauma or hard things that are out of our control, especially as creatives, it's hard to stay creative. And we're going to talk about that today. My next guest is author SM Boyce. She is known for her action-packed epic fantasy series, the Grimoire Saga. She creates powerful heroes and riveting magical stories, and I'm excited to have her share with you today. And while she is a writer, she is so much more. She's a multi-passionate creative with a lot of insight and a lot of wisdom to share. So even if you are not a reader or a writer, stay with us because she's going to cover all kinds of things from pen names, why and when to use them, magic systems in fantasy. We're going to talk about what she's working on now, but we're also going to talk about your hobbies and burnout and COVID-19 and the trauma that is affecting us all on various levels. You're also going to hear how Boyce tries so wonderfully hard to refrain from using any language in this episode. I had told her that I created this podcast with my daughter in mind because she has been wanting to listen to some of the podcasts I listen to, and quite honestly, she can't yet, or at least I'd prefer her not to. And so I wanted to make this family friendly so that she could listen. So thank you to Boyce for trying your hardest. I really appreciate it. So as you can tell already, we are going to cover the gamut. So stay with us, and I hope you enjoy this interview with author SM Boyce. Hello, friend. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. I am really excited to be here. This is so fun.
Awesome. So will you just take a minute and introduce yourself to our listeners and share what it is you do?
No.
And there you have it. Boyce's personality right there.
Bye, y'all. Good talking to you. My name is SM Boyce. I am a fantasy novelist, and I have a couple secret pen names. But I am most known for the Grimoire Saga so far, and I have several series coming out in 2020 that I am super stoked about.
Woohoo! I'm excited too. So, did you always want to write, or how did this journey start for you?
That's a good question. I am one of those aliens who has always known what they wanted to do.
Awesome.
Even when I told myself that what I wanted was wrong. Because, there's that period I think every writer goes through where they're like, but writing isn't a real job. And it's it's kind of not, but that's the best part about it. So I wanted to be a lawyer at one point. I wanted to, what else was there? There was an actress, which I still kind of want to do, like voice acting and stuff. Musical theater. It was all very either writing or performance-based, which even a lawyer is performance-based if you're in the courtroom. So I thought that was really interesting when I looked back at that kind of history of what I wanted to be. Princess was never on there, surprisingly. I did want to be a mermaid. That was high on my list, though.
I could see you as maybe like a ninja princess.
A ninja princess! That's so flattering. Thank you. That is a great compliment that I will cherish through the rest of my days. Ninja awesome. Princess. Putting that on the wall. I almost cussed. I'm really trying to be as PG as possible. You may need to bleep me at some point, but I will do my darndest.
You're good. Okay, so at what point did you really make a go at writing as a career?
As a career. Okay, well, specifically as a career, that would be 2011 when I published my first book. But I published in November. That was Lichgate's, the first book in the Grimoire Saga, which I wrote, funny enough, on a Superman sleep schedule while I worked as a software tester, because my other gift is in breaking software. And I'm really good at it.
They hired you to break their software?
That is literally my job. My job was to find weaknesses, bugs, vulnerabilities. And it was so funny to have, like, there were a couple times where the programmers would look over my shoulder while I was testing, and I was kind of like, look back at them like, hey, how can I help you? And they're like, we just are completely baffled by what you're doing right now. This is not in any way the use case we were expecting. You're so hard on the software. And I just responded with, you're welcome. So go sit down. I'll have bugs for you in a bit.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So I decided to write my first book in January of 2011, and I've been working on it since I was 2016, I've been working on it since I was 16, since I was like, 2004. How old am I? No, it was a while before I actually wrote the book. I'd been world building the Grimoire Saga series for a long time, and I hadn't really believed it was possible to actually like do it as a living. I always thought it would be this hobby I had. But reading, it was a passion growing up. You know how I read instead of going to birthday parties. It was what I loved to do. And I got such a thrill out of all those adventures and getting to live all those lives and through all those stories. And there were just this idea it's actually started out as Harry Potter fan fiction and evolved into something far beyond anything it started out as. And in 2011, after I had shared the story with my husband, he was the first person, then my fiance, that I had ever shared it with. And he's like, you need to write this. This is fantastic. This is so intricate and fun. And, so that was really great encouragement that I had from him and my parents. They were always very, very encouraging. Very lucky, I know that.
Very cool.
And then in 2011, I had a writing degree, actually. Because it was always a passion. I graduated with a writing and marketing dual degree and for Florida State University. And I just had always assumed that I'd, write for fun and get paid through the marketing. But when I started to really research the industry, and when you're classically trained as a writer, they just tell you traditionally published, you're lucky to get 15%. You have to share a lot of that with your agent. That's life. Mm-hmm. Suck it up. Mm-hmm. That's basically what they teach you. And in 2011, Amanda Hawking was big. J.A. Conrad was really big with his Newbie Guide to Publishing. And the more I researched indie publishing, the more the business side of my brain was kicking in and thinking, I don't have to do it the way I was taught. And there's nothing against traditional publishing. I think for some people, it is a wonderful choice. And I plan to traditionally publish at some point in the future. But what I wanted to do first was build my audience so that when I come to a traditional publisher, when I come to an agent in the future and become a hybrid author, I come with an audience. I come with strategy, marketing, a whole pipeline already built into what I do. And that makes as an author, it makes me more viable to publishers to come in it that way.
Absolutely.
And so I've always approached it from this entrepreneurial business mindset because that's how I was raised and that's what my degree's in.
Very cool.
That's a long answer. I don't know if that was the answer you were looking for.
No, it's great. You kind of answered my next question, so I was trying to figure out where I was going next.
You're welcome. I'm also psychic until Thursday.
Awesome. It'll make this interview so much easier.
That's my goal. Life should
I'll just let you talk.
Okay, just let me ramble for a solid hour. Like, okay, nice podcast. Bye.
So you mentioned pen names. Yeah. Can we talk about that for a second? Why would someone choose to use a pen name?
Sure. There's a lot of reasons. One is to experiment in a new genre. Mm-hmm. But I think most importantly, the reason why you want a pen name is if you are writing in a genre that does not have a crossover audience. Mm-hmm. For instance, my pen names are in romance, specifically fantasy romance. And the reason I have two fantasy romance pen names is the first one was a total experiment. Sure. It was kind of an experiment gone a little wrong. So I rebranded and relaunched with the new one. And that's why there are two for the same genre. And typically I don't recommend you do that. But the nice thing about pen names is you can screw it up and no one cares.
Yeah.
I just censored myself twice, so I'm really trying.
You're doing good.
So you can make mistakes and it doesn't matter. And so typically, and a lot of times when you look at Amazon, and specifically curiously, you see this very frequently, if not the most, in romance genres. You will see names that are very obviously not someone's first and last name. And so you see pen names a lot in erotic fiction, but in romance in general, like with rom-coms and all of that, there's this branding element to your name, and your name needs to sound relatable. It needs to sound fun. It needs to sound maybe funny. Your name is part of your brand when you are in romance specifically. And so I think that's why typically you see so many pen names in romance, probably more so than you see in other genres. Now that's not backed by anything. That's just kind of my gut, and I'm totally okay with being wrong about it.
No, I've seen that as well. I would agree with that statement.
Cool. Okay.
It's definitely interesting.
Yeah, but I think that the most important reason why you would want a pen name is if you don't have the crossover audience, and that's because if somebody's following you, they follow your Amazon page, or they have, they're on your email list or whatever, but they look you up on Amazon and they know you for hard sci-fi. Like hard sci-fi, no wiggle room, no hand waving. That's what they love. That's what they read. And they really love that you write that.
Yeah.
If you then release a rom-com, they're going to wonder what in your life fractured. They're going to be so confused and they might stop reading you entirely. There is that risk. Now, some authors have this magnetism to where they can release absolutely anything and people love it.
Anything.
But if you look at even 1% authors, Stephen King is the exception to this. He's been in this realm so much longer than any of us that I think he gets away with things the rest of us maybe won't. But there are other authors, you see a lot of what they write is very niched. It is very focused, even if it's not within like a subgenre of a major one, like even if it's not urban fantasy only, even if they have like epic fantasy, urban fantasy, maybe a little portal fiction like that, it's blended. They are still under the umbrella of fantasy, like Neil Gaiman is evidence for that. Pretty much everything he's done, with the exception of the occasional poem or charity work, it tends to be fantasy driven because that's just what he likes to do. But if he released a murder mystery that had absolutely no supernatural component to it, and it was like a cut and dry murder mystery, I think a lot of his fans would be like, I love you, dude, but what are you doing? I'm so confused, And we saw that too with J.K. Rowling when she launched her pen name, Cuckoo something? I don't remember what it was.
Oh, shoot. I had it in my head. I just lost it.
Well, anyway, she released a mystery, and it's totally okay for writers to want to write multiple things. That's normal. We are all over the place. We want to do all the things. But when it comes to your launch strategy, I do think that especially as a self-published author, but also this is true of traditionals as well, it's very important that you weave strategy into your online presence. Like there is nothing wrong with having multiple pen names at all. It's a little more work, but in the end, I think that extra work will be worth it. And there are people who disagree with that, and that's totally okay. I have an assistant, and she helps me keep everything together and everything moving. And I think this would be very difficult to do on my own, but it would be doable. It would just take a lot more time.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, is how challenging is it for you to switch back and forth, or to be, the other person, or to try to keep track of two different names? I would find that challenging.
Yeah, it is challenging. And as an author, especially in the self-publishing sphere, you wear a lot of hats. You do a lot of jobs. You are the publisher, you are the marketer, you are the advertiser. Sometimes you're the assistant. You're the creator. You're the brand manager. You do all these things. And I really think it's important to really keep in mind why you're doing all this. Yeah. Because if you lose track of that why, that motivation, that purpose-driven gumption, you're going to derail. And that's what you see a lot of. You see a lot of people who try to do everything all at once and they burn out. And like, of course, if you feel like you have to do all the things right now, of course you're going to burn out. And that I've been there and it sucks. So finding all the ways you can to build in structures is really important. And I think that, like for me, part of my structures is actually how I build my day. And I used to work every single day. I used to write 6 to 8 hours a day. I would rarely take off. And, effing shocker, sorry, it is so hard to censor. It derails me completely.
So good.
I'm just going to try to, okay, shocker, it burned me out. I cuss like a sailor, y'all. This is hard. No, it burned me out. And so part of my structure now is I build in time to just play and go do whatever feels right. Sometimes it's, I'm going to go play Animal Crossing for 8 hours. And sometimes it is, what I really feel like writing all of my social media for the next 2 weeks today. So what I do is I get up at the same time every day. And that actually is a big component of getting good sleep, is having that structure of getting up and going to bed at the same time every day. So get up, and that first 3 hours of my day is writing. And that's just a non-negotiable. And then lunch, and then whatever I want to do. And usually this is where I do my admin, my marketing, stuff like that. I have a couple other projects that I'm working on. So this is also when I do that kind of stuff. And it's very open. It's what do I feel called to do today? And I usually have a list of everything I want to do this week, and I just pick from it. And that kind of helps me have a bit of freedom, but at the same time, make sure I'm getting everything done. And my team uses ClickUp, which is a free service. ClickUp is really great for, if I think of something and I'm like, okay, well, this is definitely my assistant's wheelhouse, then I just create the task, assign it to her, put a due date on it, and I know it's handled because that task isn't going away until she's done. And
that's cool.
Yeah. So when you start to build in structures like that, you start to realize oh, okay, I can breathe now because I know it's going to be handled. I think that when you have so much to do, the biggest fear is something slipping through the cracks. But if you build in structures to avoid that, then you'll be okay.
I think that's great. And it's so good to recognize that, like you said, because burnout is real and we get so overwhelmed by all the little things and trying to fit it all in that it just kills our creativity. And we have to have that time to play and to be re-energized and to be able to keep creating. So I think that's huge, for you to be able to have found that structure but loosely so that you can play. And I think that's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been exploring a lot of masculine and feminine energy. And I think that, I don't want to derail because this is 12 podcasts just talking about this. But, a lot of times people mistake masculine and feminine energy for gender roles. And it's actually not the same thing. We all possess both within us. And it's maybe not labeled totally correctly because I think people get caught up in the name. But masculine energy tends to be more of the structures and feminine energy tends to be more of the creativity and the play. And it's all about a give and take between the two. And it's this fluid back and forth that you do throughout the day. So what I really started to realize was I like to be more in that creative, air quote, feminine energy. Most that's my central core. But without the structures in place from the air quote masculine energy, then I would just be out in the back playing with my dog all day, so it's all about finding that balance. And when I really started to study those energies and how they're present in all of us, I started to really get in tune with, okay, what do I need? And what I need isn't the same thing as you need. It's not the same as people who are listening. All of us need a different balance in our day and come from it one or, typically you come from either more of the structured energy or more of the flowy energy. You're happiest in one of those two. But again, 12 other podcasts we don't have to get into right now.
No, well, hey, we can come back and do it some more.
I'll talk about that.
I love that
all day.
I love that, though. I love that there is that balance. But like you said, we all have our own balance. And I think that's really cool and important to be aware of that and to learn that about ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. And to forgive yourself as you learn. Because I think we're raised in this kind of hyper-vigilant society that's you should have all of your stuff figured out and you're not allowed to feel uncertain about things. And really you needed to get all that stuff done yesterday. So, hop on, let's go. But having forgiveness for yourself as you figure it out and experiment and play with it and tweak it, I think that's really important to avoiding burnout.
I think that's good. I think sometimes, even for myself, like I could be nervous about experimenting and trying. Because what if I try something and then I don't get anything done because I'm not doing what I normally do. But I think that it's cool to be able to experiment and to find a better way of being for ourselves.
Yeah, and part of experimenting is screwing up. Like every time you make a mistake, go, oh, okay, well that didn't work. I spent the first 3 months of this year getting very little done and being absolutely frustrated with myself about it unfairly. It just wasn't productive by any means to give myself crap for it. So, sorry, now I'm like, well, is that a cuss word? Should I?
No.
Oh, I think about this way too much. So,
don't stress. Crap is fine.
Crap is fine. Okay, good. But yeah, it's like, as long as you learn what worked and what didn't, I had a coach tell me this, every time something doesn't go the way you want it to, or, honestly, even when it goes brilliantly well, ask yourself, what worked, what didn't, what can I do differently next time? And that is the best way to no longer be afraid of failure, because it's not failure anymore. It's just a lesson.
It's brilliant.
And even if, even when you succeed, there's probably something you could have done differently. So learning from your successes too.
Sure.
It's such a freer way to look at life.
Absolutely. Yes, I like that. That's good. Okay, well, before we move on, I have to say it because it was going to bother me, but J.K. Rowling's book was The Cuckoo's Calling, and she used the pseudonym Robert Galbraith.
Right. And curiously, you'll notice what she did there was very strategic. Typically, men do better in that genre. So she had a male pen
That's
name.
interesting.
So, like, it doesn't matter what level you're at. It's important to use strategy when it comes to your pen names, and be okay with understanding marketing and demographics. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, if that sucks all the fun out of it for you, then yeah, absolutely, don't do it. If you're not enjoying this, don't do it. But I just think it's so interesting that she had a male pen name for that.
All right. Well, good interruption there.
Yeah.
Well, then let's move on.
Okay.
So I want to make sure and mention this because I have you on the show, but you had sent in your outlining process to me for my other segment on It's Time to Write, and we shared that in, I believe it's episode 12, and I just want to make sure to mention that people can go check that out because your outlining process is definitely worth mentioning.
Thank you.
It's a craft unto itself, and I know that you have worked really hard to create it to be that.
I have literally made a course on it. It's only for the writers that I mentor.
That's amazing. You should.
I found that when I teach, I cement the concept for myself, and I also realize what I don't know. Because when I'm trying to teach someone something and they come to me with a question, I'm like, wow, that's an amazing question, and I don't have the answer. Let me get back to you. And I go have a deep dive crash course in it, and I come back. And so when I teach, it really cements the concepts for me. And for the writers that I mentor, I created a plot structure course, world building, characters, and immersive writing. I'm still
love it.
Yeah, the plot structure course is done. The other 3 are so massive; they were originally 1. And when I saw how absolutely overwhelmingly massive it was, I decided that I wasn't a total jerk, and I was going to make it easier for them to actually use. So I broke it up into 3. But yeah, it was really fun. And the more I put in there, the more I learned. Like I made one of the sections is on magic systems, which is crucial in fantasy.
Ooh.
And as I was designing it, I realized that a lot of what I had been doing up to that point was intuitive, based on all the fantasy that I've been reading. A lot of what I'm doing was with soft magic too. Do you know about the magic systems and Brandon Sanderson's rules for magic?
I do not.
Okay, so I didn't either. And so when I started researching more, because I knew of Brandon Sanderson and I knew he had rules for magic. It's one of the things he's most famous for is his theory on magic.
Okay.
And the more I dove into that, the more I realized there was a lot I didn't know, and it was so great to get in there and start to understand, okay, hard magic versus soft magic. Hard magic is Mistborn. Hard magic is, there are set rules, and it's almost like magic is science.
Okay.
A plus B equals C every time.
Okay.
Whereas if you look at soft magic, which is more Lord of the Rings, it's kind of like, a wizard did it. It's just the wizard,
Right.
Hand wave, it's fine. That's more kind of ethereal. And you notice that a lot of times in soft magic systems, the people actually telling the story don't have magic, because magic in and to itself is more about making men feel small. It's kind of that almost religious fervor to it, that otherworldly, I don't know if I'll ever understand it feeling that we get when we think about the universe or where we fit in there, all the unknown questions that we have, even in our world. And so magic on both sides of that spectrum has an integral part in the story, and it's all about how your magic weaves into your plot and your world building. And so there's this entire world, pun intended, of theory just in magic systems, and that was one little section of my course. And so I got to do these deep dives and just explore and learn, and that's one of my favorite things to do in life, is learn. And the more I learn, the more I absorb, the more I can compress it into a useful little nugget and then hand it to someone.
Oh, I love that.
That feels really good. So that whole process is kind of how I learn. I absorb, I process, and then I teach, and I give it to someone else. That helps me internalize it.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to have to check those out.
Well, I don't sell them. They're not public.
Oh, well, girl, get on that.
It's funny. It's like, and this is totally a limiting belief in my head that I probably need to get over, but I kind of haven't wanted to be some kind of writing guru, because it just felt weird. It felt like, but I'm not Stephen King. Why should you buy a course for me? Go buy one from Neil Gaiman. He's got this, go over there. But the more I do this, the more I realize how much of a limiting belief that really is. And I just want to be really careful of how I position myself in the field. Writing is always my passion. Talking to readers is one of my greatest passions, and I just don't ever want to lose that for the sake of teaching writing. And I don't necessarily have to, right? That's not a give or take.
Right.
Neil Gaiman again is. Can you guess who my idol is? No, but Neil, he is, and he's a great example of somebody who writes fabulous work but also teaches. So that is a possibility for my future. Is all of that.
Okay.
We'll see.
Well, yeah, we'll let that evolve as it is meant to, and keep us posted.
Yeah, absolutely. If I launch, you will be the first one to know.
Fantastic. Because I learn a lot from you, and
I'm so glad.
You inspired me to use your index card process, and
oh, really?
Yeah, and I've loved using that. So I've put that into my own outlining process, which that has elaborated in and of itself because of how you do yours.
That is so cool.
Well, and I'm definitely not on the extent that y'all, you got to listen to that episode, because it's very in-depth.
That was crazy. The craziest part of it, Morgan, is that was the short version.
Oh, I believe it.
Sorry, y'all. I love this stuff.
It's awesome, and it shows. But that's amazing, because that's what you do. That's what lights you up. You're a creator.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, what are you working on now, writing wise? What can we expect to see?
Okay, I have made announcements about this, so I have no guilt in telling you all the things. So, I am working on 2 series simultaneously, which is a challenge because these are epics in the fantasy sense.
Wow.
They are each their own individual worlds. I have developed extensive histories for both of them. They each have unique magic systems, like we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Wraithblade is the first one that's going to be coming out. I would like that to come out in May. With the whole COVID thing, I'm just being very careful about how I launch now.
Mm-hmm.
But we're looking at probably May for Wraithblade, and then the other series is called Blazebound, and that's going to be coming out hopefully in June or July. But that one isn't as far along as Wraithblade, so I'm not entirely sure yet.
Okay.
We've already sold audio rights for Wraithblade, which is really cool.
Wow.
I get to work with Tantor, which is just this fun new experience I haven't gotten to have yet.
Yeah,
It's a fantastic audio company, and I'm so excited.
That's exciting.
Yeah. And then I haven't sold rights for Blazeburn yet because it's not really far enough along for me to comfortably release them yet. But we will see what happens. So Wraithblade is a hard magic system world, but Wraithblade is about a peasant in an epic fantasy world who suddenly becomes fused with the darkest magic in the land, and everyone around him starts hunting him.
Oh.
And he's a survivor, so that is his one asset against these basically armies of elite magical warriors. And the whole beauty of Wraithblade is actually the magic system. It's one of my favorite parts about it because it's a hard magic system, and really all I've ever written is moderate to soft.
Yeah.
So this truly is this beautiful, exciting new challenge for me.
Very cool.
And I have had so much fun with it. And so the coolest part of the world for me right now, besides the characters whom I'm just in love with, is the magic system and this concept of reagents. So everything in this world is based on potions, and all the magic comes from potions. And so basically, this ore called Spellgust gets refined, and that's the source of all magic. It's the Spellgust ore. And there's multiple refining methods, and basically, if you have money, you have magic. And so I really looked at how inherently no one is really better at magic than anyone else. It's just were you lucky enough to grow up with it in your world, and you understand how to use it. And basically, power in this world relates to how many potions does your family, how many recipes does your family own. And so it's interesting to see the cultural and economic impacts of that as it plays out within the series.
Fascinating.
Thank you. And then Blazebound is very much a coming of age. Wraithblade is more so a man finding family.
Okay.
And his purpose. It's about fathers and sons. It's about protecting what you never trusted yourself to protect before and letting yourself be happy. That's what Wraithblade is.
That's good.
And Blazebound, thank you. Blazebound is coming of age. It's about the implications of having power and how power can both protect or destroy. And so everything in Blazebound is more of a soft to medium magic. It's a little more what I'm familiar with in the wheelhouse of what I've been doing up to this point. And it is fire-based, but fire has to come from somewhere, and it has to burn something. Oh. And that is, I don't want to give too much away, but that is the crux of the magic system in that world. And the very few, anyone can technically get power, but there's a lot of religious control over how it's distributed. So there's a lot of elitism. There's a lot of there's wealth disparity within it. There's a 1% definitely. And so we get to explore a different kind of cultural implication and economic implication of Blazebound. So I really like to have diversity and just expansive worlds within the stories.
Love it. Oh, I'm excited.
Thank you.
So you mentioned during this time of COVID-19, I tend to not like to date the podcast, but because this is such a global tragedy that we are all experiencing and being affected in different ways, how has this impacted you or business or creativity? And really, I guess it doesn't even need to be limited to COVID-19. This could be for any, how do we deal with being creatives during trauma or difficult things that we have no control over?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think the most important thing we can do is take the time to feel. I think a lot of times we vilify crying, we vilify feeling. Mm-hmm. We vilify the idea that, crying is weak, emotions are weak. Oh, you shouldn't feel bad. It's basically, if you hear yourself shoulding, that's what I call it. Don't shit on yourself. If you should on yourself, then that's not really you. Yeah. That's not really what you think. That's not really what you want. That's what you feel you're supposed to want.
Right.
And in something like COVID, we're in the middle of a global trauma. And the thing with trauma is we can't fully process it. We can't fully heal from it until it's over. And right now, some of the most devastating part of this is that we don't know when it's going to be over.
Right.
There's so much uncertainty. There's so much unknown. There's so much pain. There's so much just heartbreak right now. And it is really difficult to create when you're in the midst of that. So I'm very lucky in a way because I built my structure before all this hit.
Yeah.
I knew that writing for me is a non-negotiable thing. And if I don't do it, I start tweaking out. And I'm only partially kidding. I go a little crazy if I'm not writing regularly. And so I have several rituals and routines when I sit down to write that really help me escape whatever's going on in my world. I'm very visual. So I light a candle when I'm working, and that's always on when I'm working. And then when I blow it out, I'm done for the day. And I also wear a necklace, a very specific necklace, every time I write. And that helps me immerse in the world. And I just kind of, symbolically, when I take it off, all of the characters' problems that I was working through, they hang out on the necklace until I'm ready to dive back in. And that may not work for everybody, but because I'm very visual and very tangible things have really profound impact on me. So when I have that little routine, it really works. And actually, this is really funny. I finished writing one morning, and I had an appointment at 1 o'clock. I was on the go, and I needed to stop by the bank on the way. And in the bank, I noticed that I was kind of absent and a little spacey. And I was just like, I could hear what they were saying, but it took me a second or two longer than it should have to process all their questions. And I came out of there feeling kind of like, what is wrong with me today? And I sit down in the car and I look down, and I'm wearing my necklace. I'm still in Saldia. That's why I'm having trouble interacting with humans, because I'm thinking about vocals and magic potions and so it actually works for me. But I think the key is to find ways to metaphorically shut the door. I think it was Virginia Woolf who said that. I think she was speaking specifically about women, but in general, creatives need a room with a door. Creatives need a room with a door, and they need a place to shut out the world and just breathe something into existence, because that is such an integral part of our happiness and our livelihood and our ability to function is to create.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I had, I can't remember who it was. I was listening to someone that used green running shoes for when he would write. So he'd put on the shoes, and while he was wearing it, he knew, I'm writing. That's all I'm doing. And then he would take off the shoes and, switch to whatever else he was doing. But yeah, just those symbolic things that trigger something in our minds that, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. And now we're done. Yeah.
Yeah. What's funny is I have a literal hat that I wear when I edit for writers that I mentor.
Oh,
I literally put on a hat and that helps me. It's the same hat every time. It's my voice hat. And when I can do that, then I can be brand editor for them. And,
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
That's a real thing.
You're like, this is what we're doing now.
Yep.
Oh, that's great. So I remember that you, this was a while back, but that you were making jewelry. Are you still doing that, or do you have other creative outlets that you engage in still?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I specifically love this question because most creatives are multi-passionate. We love a lot of different things. We just like to create. And the whole thing with being in that creative energy is typically you can only do it for about 3 to 4 hours at a time. And I've seen a couple studies on that, but I can't remember the name of them. So maybe that's just hearsay. But typically you can work on something creative for about 3 to 4 hours at a time. And then you need a break. You need to step away from it. And sometimes you need to step away for it until the next day, but you still want to create, you still want to do stuff. So we tend to create multiple hobbies around that. With jewelry, this actually started because I was too stubborn to pay someone to make me a Tree of Life pendant. So it's like, screw it. I'll learn how to make it myself. I'm smart. And I did. I don't know if it looks as good as theirs. It was probably better to just buy it from them. But it's a nice little hobby. And from there I got into, so I did wire wrapping for a time, and then I got into beading. The downside of a hobby like that is I have about 100, 200 bracelets. I'm never going to wear them all. And some of them are not even my thing, they don't even fit me. It's just, I wanted to make them and they're pretty. So either everyone in my life is going to get bracelets for the rest of their lives, or I need a way to sell these. And so my tendency is typically to turn any kind of hobby into something profitable. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of creatives try to figure out a way to profit on this. And it's totally normal. There's nothing wrong with that. I think what I noticed was when I started trying to create an online business to sell these things, it required effort, attention, ad spend. It was this whole other business, and I wanted to treat it like a side gig, but you don't create a renowned jewelry brand as a side gig. And even on Etsy, it's so flooded with jewelry that nothing was sold. And so I realized that the more I tried to make this work as a business, the less I enjoyed it and the less I did it. So that is kind of the give and take. It's you can just have a hobby, and you don't have to profit off the hobby.
Yeah, and I think maybe you probably even should.
You probably should, because it's important to have something that's just for you.
Yeah.
And again, everyone in my life, you're just all going to get bracelets for the rest of forever. So make space in your jewelry box, because that's what's coming for Christmas. What I did find was I found a local artist guild that has a storefront at a mall. And they're kind of tucked away in the back. They don't get a lot of traffic, but I sell maybe a couple pieces every month, and it doesn't cost a lot for me to put my displays in there. So that makes me feel good, because at least I'm not wearing it. At least somebody gets to enjoy it, even if it's looking at it for a second. So that feels good to me, and it's a business write-off, and it works for me. That's a nice compromise for me. Okay. If anybody wants to go buy jewelry, check out the Sunset Mall in Las Vegas. My stuff's in there.
Oh, that's great. And I think that is important, just to have something that's yours that, you can escape to do, or that you need a break from your other creative outlets, just to have something different. And sometimes it's really great to have a tangible thing to do with your hands.
Yeah. My husband makes fun of me because I can't just talk on the phone. I have to pace while I talk on the phone. This is kind of like I'm seated while we're doing this, and I'm fidgety as hell.
My husband's like that. Well, do you have any final thoughts to encourage other creatives, especially during this time, or really during any time?
I think that remembering your why is probably the most important thing at any given time, at any point in your life, to live and breathe from your why and come back to it when you feel lost. Because if you have that guiding why, what that really is your purpose. And we put so much, as humans, we strive to find purpose every day.
Yeah.
It's what fuels us. It's what gives us meaning, because I think we're all a little bit nihilistic just by default. So having purpose helps us breathe through that fear of the unknown, and breathe through that fear of death, and breathe through that fear of, but what if this doesn't mean anything? Well, your life has meaning, and especially your life has the meaning you give it. And I think as long as if in those moments where you do feel uncertain, where you do feel lost, come back to who you are, come back to what you know, and trust yourself. I know that can be so hard to do sometimes, but trust that you know what to do, and trust that if you come back to why you do what you do, you will never be lost.
That's good.
Thank you.
So the big final question, how hard was it to censor yourself?
Oh my God, I'm just tweaking. It was a shake.
Shake it out.
I can't tell you how many F-bombs I wanted to drop. And I'm really proud of myself. I did effing, and that was the extent. That was my one. I did it.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome.
Well, this was so fun, Morgan. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed being here.
I'm so glad you're here. How can our listeners find you? Where should they go to follow you, to find your books?
Yeah, sure. Right now, I am on Amazon, and that's exclusively on Amazon for pretty much everything. Okay. I'm probably going to take the Grimoire Saga off Amazon in the near future, and it will be available everywhere. Probably going to be June.
Okay.
So check out Amazon. My website is smboyce.com. And I am on Instagram, Facebook, pretty much everything as the SM Boyce, because SM Boyce originally was taken on Twitter. So I had to get creative.
Hey,
actually, funny story about that. And I still feel bad about this to this day. But when I joined Twitter, I couldn't get SM Boyce because a gentleman already had it. And so I took the SM Boyce, and everybody was tweeting him.
Oh, no.
Instead of me. And he was like, girl, tell him to stop. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm not telling them to go there, I promise. And he was so sweet. He messaged me and he's like, just take it. Oh. I felt so bad. Well, thank you for letting me have it. I really appreciate it. And I felt so bad that I drove him off the handle. Oh my God, I felt so guilty. And it wasn't even intentional. It wasn't. He just got sick of people being like, are you SM Boyce, the author? No.
No. Oh, shoot.
To this day, to the poor gentleman who gave up his Twitter handle to me, thank you so much. I am still immensely grateful for that. And I'm so sorry. Sorry.
Oh, that's funny. Well, we will make sure and link all of your links in the show notes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing all your insights and your journey with us. We appreciate it.
My absolute treat. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Awesome. If you enjoyed this or any of the episodes in the Lotus Bloom podcast, please consider subscribing where you listen. You can also leave a review and share with your friends. It means the world to a growing podcast, and it means the world to me. Thank you.